Welcome back to the channel. In the previous part of our Hells Angels vs. Pagans series, we covered events up to the murder of Francisco Rosado, president of the Pagan Bronx chapter, who was gunned down in broad daylight by unidentified assailants. Following his death, the Hells Angels appeared to retreat from the area, which allowed the Pagans to expand into the city without opposition, at least for a time. However, this act of aggression did not go unnoticed. The Hells Angels quickly regrouped, re-established their presence, and began planning a large-scale response. Their objective was simple: to show strength and remind the Pagans that they were trespassing on hostile territory. On May 14, 2022, the Hells Angels organized a massive motorcade, a convoy of around 100 bikers, intended as a show of force. The group planned to ride past the Pagan clubhouse as a warning and demonstration of dominance. While the official plan was to simply drive through the area, a more aggressive faction of about 40 bikers split off, determined to deliver a violent message. 5 of these bikers carried walkie-talkies to coordinate movements and secure every possible escape route. Their role was to alert the others if police appeared. The remaining 25 bikers were armed with knives, hammers, and bats, prepared to attack the Pagan clubhouse directly. Inside the clubhouse were only 7 members of the Pagans, outnumbered and outmatched but unwilling to back down. They fought fiercely, holding their ground as long as possible before being overwhelmed by the Hells Angels. The brutal fight lasted only a few minutes before the Angels retreated to their stronghold in Cape Cod. When police arrived, they found a scene of chaos and bloodshed. 7 men were rushed to the hospital with serious injuries. One had to be carried out with a knife still lodged in his arm. What was meant to be a show of intimidation had turned into a violent and near-fatal confrontation. In response, the city of Fall River took administrative action targeting both the Pagans and the Hells Angels by shutting down clubhouses and increasing law enforcement pressure. The FBI also launched raids on several Hells Angels properties across the country. Although tensions have since calmed, the situation remains volatile, like a dormant volcano waiting to erupt. In the end, there were no winners in this conflict. The only outcome was tighter government crackdowns on both clubs. As the old saying goes, pride comes before the fall. That's exactly what happened to both the Hells Angels and the Pagans, the most dangerous Hells Angels members. A look at their crimes. Given the brutality of these clashes, it raises an important question: how many lives have been claimed by each side? To understand this, we must look at some of the most notorious members of the Hells Angels and their criminal histories. David Wolf Carroll, born David MacDonald. Carroll, on April 1, 1952, in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, was a feared figure in the criminal underworld. Known simply as Wolf, he was a key member of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club and a major player in organized crime throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Carroll was involved in numerous illegal activities and became one of the most infamous figures associated with the club. He mysteriously disappeared on March 28, 2001, and his fate remains unknown. Despite his disappearance, Carroll is still remembered as one of the most dangerous and influential members the Hells Angels ever had. One of the most dangerous members of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club was David Wolf Carroll. He was involved in numerous violent crimes and was one of the masterminds behind the infamous Lennoxville massacre. Wolf began his criminal career in Halifax with a local biker gang called the 13th Tribe. It was through this group that he forged an alliance with the Hells Angels. His reputation grew after his role in the Lennoxville massacre, which occurred on March 24, 1985. The massacre was planned as a cleansing of a faction that had damaged the club's reputation and discipline. By the late 1970s, the Hells Angels Montreal chapter had grown too large to manage effectively. To maintain control, it was divided into two sub-chapters, Montreal North and Montreal South. Ironically, the South chapter was based in Sorel, which is actually northeast of Montreal. The North chapter was led by Laurent Léon Viau, a former member of the Popeyes Motorcycle Club, another outlaw biker gang. The South chapter was headed by Régent Zig Zig Lessard, who was far more disciplined and organized compared to Viau.
Viau's reckless and violent nature became a serious problem after the murder of Eve Trudeau, the president of the Montreal chapter, who was gunned down outside a restaurant alongside Guy Frenchy Gilbert, the president of Satan's Choice in Kitchener, Ontario. After Buteau's death, Michel Sky Langlois became president, but lacked the firm control Buteau had maintained. Viau's Popeyes mentality led to the North chapter skimming profits that were supposed to be shared among all chapters. Members were also heavily using the drugs meant for sale and distribution. Their erratic behavior attracted unwanted police attention, as many were arrested for minor crimes. The other chapters saw this as a disgrace, tarnishing the Hells Angels' image as an organized, disciplined criminal enterprise. Tensions between the Montreal North and South chapters escalated. The South, led by Lessard, favored structure and control, while the North, led by Viau, had become chaotic and self-destructive. The breaking point came when Eve Trudeau, a founding member of the North chapter and one of the gang's most effective hitmen, stole money paid by Wolf Carroll for a contracted murder. Trudeau used the funds to feed his growing cocaine addiction. This betrayal angered both Carroll and Lessard, who decided that the North chapter had become a liability. They conspired with Jean-Baptiste Boucher, president of the Sherbrooke chapter, to eliminate the entire North chapter. They arranged a supposed party at the Sherbrooke clubhouse, inviting members from several chapters, Laval, Sorel, Sherbrooke, and Halifax, as a cover for their deadly plan. The North chapter was required to attend, though they were late to arrive. When they finally showed up, only Viau and 4 other members attended. Eve Trudeau was absent, having entered a drug rehabilitation program. His absence inadvertently saved his life. Once the North chapter arrived, they were ambushed by 41 Hells Angels members and shot to death in cold blood. This became known as the Lennoxville Massacre. Afterward, Wolf Carroll vanished, and the Canadian government issued a warrant for his arrest on 13 counts of first-degree murder. His disappearance remains unsolved, and his actions led to the eventual closure of the Halifax chapter and the imprisonment of several Hells Angels members. Eve Trudeau, born on February 4, 1946 in Quebec, Canada, became one of the most prolific killers to emerge from the violent biker wars of the country. Unlike the stereotypical biker, Trudeau was small, only 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing about 135 pounds, but he was known as the Hells Angels' most efficient assassin. Trudeau's criminal career began in his early 20s when he joined the Popeyes Motorcycle Club, an outlaw biker gang founded in 1965. The Popeyes rose to prominence during Quebec's Grande Noirceur, Great Darkness period, rebelling against the ultra-conservative Union Nationale government. The club promoted ideas of freedom and rebellion, but became infamous for its extreme violence. The Popeyes later formed a strategic alliance with the Hells Angels after their rival club, Satan's Choice, allied with the Outlaws Motorcycle Club. This partnership brought Trudeau into contact with the Angels. He quickly earned respect as a contract killer, targeting members of rival gangs. When the Popeyes officially patched over to become the Hells Angels on December 5, 1977, Trudeau became a founding member of the Quebec chapter. Trudeau ignited a deadly feud between the Hells Angels and the Outlaws when he murdered 2 Outlaws members who were drinking at a bar popular among the Angels. Without hesitation, he gunned them down in cold blood, escalating the violence between the 2 gangs. Yves Trudeau eventually admitted to killing 43 people between 1970 and 1985, with his most violent period occurring during the Outlaws conflict from 1978 to 1983, when he was responsible for 18 of 23 outlaw deaths. Trudeau's series of poor decisions, while with the Hells Angels, eventually brought the gang's wrath upon him. He narrowly escaped an assassination attempt thanks to his decision to enter drug rehabilitation. Later in life, Trudeau became a government informant, providing testimony against several members of organized crime groups. He died of cancer in 2008. The rise and violence of the Pagans Motorcycle Club. The Pagans Motorcycle Club established itself from the beginning as a structured and Hells Angels and the Outlaws when he murdered 2 Outlaws members who were drinking at a bar popular among the Angels. Without hesitation, he gunned them down in cold blood, escalating the violence between the 2 gangs.
Eve Trudeau eventually admitted to killing 43 people between 1970 and 1985, with his most violent period occurring during the Outlaws conflict from 1978 to 1983, when he was responsible for 18 of 23 outlaw deaths. Trudeau's series of poor decisions while with the Hells Angels eventually brought the gang's wrath upon him. He narrowly escaped an assassination attempt thanks to his decision to enter drug rehabilitation, organized criminal enterprise. The group adopted a written constitution, formed a governing hierarchy, and appointed a national president. By the mid to late 1960s, the Pagans had gained a reputation for extreme violence and for being part of the one-percenter biker subculture. The gang's rapid expansion after the Vietnam War brought in many disillusioned veterans, which led to internal instability and violent power struggles. Under the leadership of John Satan Marin in the early 1970s, the Pagans grew to around 5,000 members. Unlike other clubs, the Pagans never had a permanent mother chapter. Their top leadership consisted of a 13-member national board that controlled the organization's decisions, while the Hells Angels gained notoriety through acts of violence and intimidation. The Pagans rose to power through narcotics and firearms trafficking. They became one of the largest suppliers of illegal weapons and drugs in the United States, with smuggling operations that extended into neighboring countries such as Canada. Their main areas of operation were along the east coast of the United States, particularly in states such as Florida, New York, and Massachusetts. Even in the 2020s, the Pagans continued to be heavily involved in narcotics and firearms distribution. In one major case, 30 members of the club were convicted in a federal court in Pittsburgh for drug trafficking and illegal weapons possession. The 1970s and 1980s were considered the golden age of drug trafficking for biker gangs in North America, and the Pagans dominated the methamphetamine trade in the northeastern United States. However, despite their success, the Pagans failed to expand into Canada. According to former member Andrew Chef Glick, the club abandoned its plans to move north due to Canada's strict anti-biker laws and the notoriously violent reputation of the Hells Angels in that region. The Pagans' history is filled with episodes of extreme violence. On July the 17th, 1994, during the Tri-County Annual Charity Festival, a fight broke out that left 2 Pagans dead and 1 Tri-County club member with his throat slit. In another incident in 2005, the vice president of the Hells Angels Philadelphia chapter was assassinated in broad daylight, an act widely attributed to the Pagans. The Pagans also developed connections with various organized crime families across several states. In Pittsburgh, they were known to have ties with the LaRocca crime family. One notable associate, Anthony Rocky LaRocca, the nephew of former crime boss John LaRocca, continued to run criminal operations from prison after being sentenced to life for the murder of John Hetherington. Another associate, Jason Evans, was arrested on April 8, 2022, and sentenced to 57 months in prison for large-scale drug trafficking in Pittsburgh. One of the largest law enforcement operations against the Pagans occurred in 2018 when 49 members were arrested in Rhode Island. Authorities seized 52 firearms, a rocket launcher, and a significant quantity of illegal substances, including marijuana, crack cocaine, and heroin. In the end, it seems that neither side, the pagans nor the Hells Angels, has truly benefited from their violent way of life. Their history proves the old saying true: those who live by the sword die by the sword.